Well, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for coming to this, what I think is one of the most important panels here at SBJ RTDNA this year. It's called Every Mind Matters, and it matters how we report. Melissa McCoy, former deputy managing editor at the Los Angeles Times, and someone who has traveled California, your state, if you live here, teaching reporters in probably almost 10 newsrooms or so, maybe 150 or so reporters about the issues that we're going to share with you today.
We know when we do report on mental health and maybe some ways that we could do a better job, and sort of the upshot of it all is we're looking for more balance. And I've used, we very specifically used an elephant here, balancing on a beach ball. Looks pretty hard, right? But we know that elephants never forget. Okay, neither do viewers. Viewers don't forget. So after they've just been bombarded with story after story about how mental health problems or mental health illness can be related to violence or negative things, then that's what they remember. They remember that. In taking a look at it, I'm just going to go very briefly through the first 3 things that we ask every reporter to do when you're dealing with a mental health issue, a mental health story. First thing you want to ask yourself, relevance. Is the person's mental health status relevant to this story? In other words, do I even need to mention it? And you do this every day when you're out reporting stories, right? You're thinking about the things you're going to mention, the things you're not going to mention. Is this relevant? If you've established the person's mental health is relevant to the story, then you want to think about who the source of the diagnosis is. If you've established relevance and you've established a source, and then you want to identify the person, try to identify the person with what they are dealing with. So if you know that the person has schizophrenia, you want to identify not just the generic mentally ill. The important part about precision is just making sure that you're identifying the things that you know and not acting like you know things you don't. Okay? And I know that you're under a lot of pressure and that you're constantly being asked to get the story, get this, but oftentimes you may not have the diagnosis. So you want to be precise, and you want to be precise in the language that you use. A lot of us speak in slang. That's a normal thing in any culture. The question is, what are you going to do to make sure that you're using the right words and not using words incorrectly in a way that could be hurtful? Now, if you would like to connect with us at Team Up, you can email us with questions. This is the other thing. We want to be a resource to you. So if you have questions, if you're trying to connect with a mental health expert, you can send us an email, you can call us, and you can certainly go to our website to find out more.
Our next guest, Joanne Silberner, former NPR, Carter Center Fellow, University of Washington, mental health reporting specialist. You are on.
Thank you. I am going to talk to you a little bit about how to tell these stories, because you can get yourself all caught up in, well, I have to be so careful, I have to be so careful. But I think Melissa said this too. These are good stories. These are they're interesting stories to be told. They're important stories because these are things that are happening within your family, to you, to your neighbors, and they haven't been talked about enough. And the reason why mental illness is so poorly understood, in my mind, is because the media haven't really gotten a good way of really telling a lot of different stories. So I'm going to go through a few ways that mental illness has been treated in the media. I'm going to start with
NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. As it unfolded in court today in Cleveland, Ohio, a live television audience was allowed to see a man who is arguably the face of mental illness, a man described as a monster who for a decade held young women prisoners in his home.
It's not okay to say that this is a typical thing for someone with mental illness. In fact, he exemplifies it. If he did, there'd be a whole lot more women in a whole lot more basements. This is not typical, it's not common, and it did a lot of damage. What I want to show you now are some examples of places you can go for help. And this is a place that was done by the University of Washington. It's about 10 or 12 pages of how to report about this, and there are lots of places to go for help. This is a good one. There are, in all of these stories, if you look closely enough, there is a way to get into a story that's really going to give people hope. It's going to explain things to people. It's going to show them that things can happen. You can really make a difference if you find the right way to tell a story.